What if the woman you loved wasn't in love with you, but with the man she believed you could become? And what if, in trying to become him, you lost yourself? It always starts small. A smile that lingers too long. A laugh at a joke you didn't think was that funny. A glance that makes you feel seen, not just noticed, but recognized. And in that moment, something shifts. It's not about her, it's about you. About the aching desire to finally feel like you're enough. Not in the eyes of the world, but in hers. You tell yourself it's just connection, just chemistry. But over time, you start bending. Your voice softens, your posture, adjusts, your words filter themselves. Not out of fear, but out of hope. Hope that if you can hold her attention, if you can win her affection, then maybe you'll prove something to yourself you've never been able to believe, that you matter. But what if that entire belief is a lie? What if that need for her approval isn't love, it's a cage? And what if no one ever told you the price of building your identity around a woman's gaze? Until now, you thought it meant something. The way she laughed at your joke, leaned in slightly when you spoke, brushed your arm like it mattered. You replayed it in your mind like a secret code only you were meant to understand. It wasn't just attraction, it felt like affirmation. Like all the parts of you that had gone unnoticed for years were finally being seen. But here's the truth. It wasn't her smile that gave you hope. It was the feeling that maybe you were finally enough. You didn't chase her because of who she was. You chased her because of what she made you feel about yourself. That maybe you mattered. That maybe you were no longer invisible. And that's the illusion, believing that her attention somehow confirms your worth. You weren't falling in love. You were falling into recognition. But validation isn't love. It's a mirror, fragile, shifting, easily shattered. And when you let her reaction define your value, you hand over the power to shape who you are. Not because she asked for it, but because somewhere along the way you believed that being chosen by her would finally silence your deepest self-doubt. And that belief is the beginning of the cage. Somewhere in your childhood, maybe before you even understood what love meant, a story began to write itself inside you. It wasn't taught directly, it was whispered through the culture, sewn into the songs your parents played, painted in the films you watched, carved into the stories your teachers never questioned. The message was simple: to be chosen by a woman is the final confirmation that you are a man. Her love wasn't just affection, it was absolution. Her gaze didn't just see you, it validated you. You were told that a woman's approval would redeem all the parts of yourself you were too afraid to face alone. That her acceptance would erase the shame cover, the insecurity, and complete the man you've spent your life pretending to be. And so you chased that feeling not because you were shallow, but because you were taught that it held the answer. But what if that belief isn't romantic at all? What if it's not noble, but dangerous? What if the idea that a woman's love can make you whole is not the truth, but a beautifully packaged lie? A lie that turns you into a performer, a beggar, a boy, trapped in the body of a man still waiting for someone else to say, "You're enough now." You were never meant to question it. The idea that love redeems, that being desired by a woman somehow completes you. It's been camouflaged by centuries of poetry, religion, pop culture, and philosophical sentimentality. But then comes a voice like Immanuel Kant's, cold-measured, unromantic, and it slices through the illusion with surgical precision. Kant didn't write love songs. He didn't idealize romance. He wrote about duty, reason, autonomy, and in doing so, he revealed something most men still aren't ready to face: that your craving for validation through her is not love. It's bondage. Kant saw what others missed. He didn't elevate women as divine or damn them as dangerous. He simply observed logically, without sentiment, that the male need for female approval is an unstable foundation for identity. He challenged the myth that affection equals moral worth. For Kant, Love was never about losing yourself in someone's eyes. It was about standing in principle unmoved by flattery or charm. And that's what makes it unsettling. Because if Kant is right, then everything you've been taught about love, about what makes you a man, is upside down. Maybe she was never meant to complete you. Maybe her gaze was never proof of your value. Maybe the truth was always colder, but freer. You told yourself you were in control. That when you adjusted your tone, softened your edges, laughed at her stories, and silenced your frustration, it was because you chose to. But the truth is harder to swallow. You weren't choosing. You were submitting. Not with chains, not with begging, but with something far more invisible, the quiet, desperate need to be enough in her eyes. Every smile you earned became proof of worth. Every moment she leaned in became a small victory. And without realizing it, you started building a version of yourself tailored to please her. You became a mask, calibrated, charming, always slightly edited. The real you, the unfiltered you, was pushed into hiding, too raw, too loud, too unsure to risk exposure. And she never asked for that mask. But you wore it anyway. Because the risk of not being admired felt greater than the pain of not being seen. You thought you were being strong, but what you were really doing was negotiating with your own identity, bartering pieces of your truth for moments of her attention. That's not love. That's dependency, dressed as devotion. And with every compromise, every false version you project, the more you forget what you were before she looked your way, and the less you know how to exist without her reflection to hold you together. Kant didn't hate women. He didn't rage against them or deny their humanity. But he did something far more unsettling. He reduced them to a role, not through cruelty, but through cold logic. To Kant, women were not moral agents in the same way men were. They were not designed, he believed, to dwell in the abstract chambers of reason, duty, and universal law. Instead, they were meant to embody virtue, not understand it to be a symbol of moral presence, not a participant in moral reasoning. He wrote that education should not develop a woman's intellect, but preserve her elegance. That philosophy would rob her of grace. And while many would dismiss these views as relics of the past, the truth is more haunting. This thinking still lives inside us. Why else does her attention feel like redemption and her silence like judgment? Why do you feel more alive when she smiles, more broken when she turns away? Maybe it's because deep down you weren't taught to see her as your equal in reason, but as your mirror in meaning. A symbol of what's good, what's pure, what's worthy. And once she becomes a symbol, you stop relating to her as a person and start worshiping her as an answer to your own unresolved questions. When a woman becomes a symbol instead of a human being, something inside you shifts. You stop seeing her clearly. She is no longer a person with her own flaws, fears, contradictions. She becomes the answer. A living embodiment of goodness, beauty, and redemption. But symbols aren't meant to be questioned. They're meant to be revered. And that reverence becomes a trap. You start projecting your unmet needs onto her, the need to be enough to be recognized, to feel worthy without explanation. And every time she smiles, it feels divine. Every time she pulls away, it feels like exile. But it's not her you're reacting to. It's the reflection of your own ache in her eyes. You gave her the script. She just read the lines you handed her. This projection turns love into a form of worship. You think you're connecting, but you're really chasing. You're chasing a feeling, an image, a myth you helped create. And the more you pursue it, the more distant she becomes, because no one can live up to being a symbol, not even her. And in that chase, you lose something vital, the ability to see her as she truly is, and the courage to face who you are without the fantasy. Because you weren't looking for love. You were looking for yourself in someone else's eyes. You think you're leading. You think you're choosing her. that every moment you open up, bend, slightly soften your stance, it's a conscious act of love. But beneath that illusion lies a truth far more unsettling. You're not choosing, you're submitting. Not to her power, but to your own unspoken hunger for approval. And the leash, you hold it yourself. She doesn't have to ask you to change. You anticipate her gaze like a compass. You adjust your tone before she frowns, mute your frustration before it rises. You mold yourself not because she demands it, but because you need her smile to feel like a man. The control doesn't come from her, it comes from your conditioning. A belief etched deep into your psyche that her affection is your worth. And that's the tragedy. She may not even know the power you've given her, but you do. You feel it every time her silence tightens around your throat like a collar, every time her validation lifts you and her withdrawal drops you. You live by the rhythm of her reactions. This isn't love. This is a quiet self-erasure, a slow, silent surrender to a story you didn't write but have lived in your whole life, a story that says your masculinity must be confirmed by her eyes, or not at all. Kant believed that men are governed by duty universal principles that guide their actions regardless of circumstance. But women, he argued, are moved by the particular, by emotion, by taste, by what pleases in the moment. To modern ears, that sounds like a critique, maybe even an insult. But Kant wasn't condemning, he was observing. And that observation reveals something men still struggle to accept, that we've built our moral compass around someone else's gaze, not our own internal law. You were taught to act from principle, but somewhere along the way, you started acting for approval, her approval. And when she smiled, you felt righteous. When she withdrew, you questioned your very worth. That's not masculine strength. It's emotional dependency dressed up as devotion. It's abandoning your compass to chase a shifting star. Her validation feels intoxicating precisely because it's not grounded in reason. It's not earned, it's given. And the unpredictability makes it powerful. A laugh, a glance, a nod, they feel like grace. Not because they align with your values, but because you've learned to equate them with being enough. But the truth is harder if your actions are dictated by how she feels, not by what you believe. You're not being moral, you're being compliant. And that's not strength, that's surrender in disguise. There's a reason her praise feels like oxygen. It bypasses your logic and hits you somewhere older, deeper, somewhere beneath the layers of intellect and self-control. It touches the boy inside who never felt quite seen. And when she looks at you with admiration, or laughs at your joke, or simply rests her gaze on you like you matter, it doesn't just feel good. It feels necessary. Like you've finally done something right. That's why it's addictive. Not because she's manipulative, not because you're weak, but because for so long you've been starving for significance. And when someone finally offers it, even briefly, you drink it like water in a desert. You don't question whether it's real or sustainable. You just want more. But this is not love. This is conditioning. She becomes the source and you the seeker. And when her validation stops, it doesn't just sting, it dismantles you. Because you weren't building confidence, you were borrowing it. Her attention becomes the measure of your manhood, and without it, you feel erased. That's the danger. When your sense of self is externally regulated, it's not a relationship, it's an addiction. And no matter how sweet the high, you'll always be chasing the next fix. Not because you love her, but because you don't yet know how to love yourself without her eyes to prove that you exist. For centuries, society didn't just romanticize women, it mythologized them. Not as equals in thought, but as symbols of moral beauty, emotional grace, and intuitive goodness. Kant, like many philosophers of his time, didn't see women as ethical agents to be reasoned with, but as emotional guides, figures whose value wasn't in their argument, but in their influence. He believed women shouldn't be burdened by the weight of abstract principles because they already embodied virtue. Their presence, not their reasoning, was the standard of moral direction. This philosophy didn't disappear, it evolved. You still feel its imprint today. That instinctive urge to impress her not with your integrity but with your charm. That subtle shift in your behavior when she enters the room. You're not responding to her, you're responding to a legacy. A cultural script that tells you she is the mirror through which your goodness is measured. And in elevating her into this untouchable symbol, you unintentionally dehumanize her. You stop relating to her as a complex thinking person. Instead, you perform hoping she'll reflect back the man you want to believe you are. But symbols don't love you, they validate you. And when she becomes a symbol, the relationship becomes theater, not truth. You didn't mean to build your identity around her gaze. It wasn't a conscious decision, it was gradual, invisible, almost innocent. One look became a signal of worth. One compliment became a thread in the fabric of your self-esteem. Over time, her perception of you didn't just matter, it became your mirror. Her smile said, "You were enough." Her silence said you weren't. And every day you woke up checking not the compass of your own convictions, but the direction of her eyes. This is the quiet tragedy so many men live without speaking the belief that their value is only real when reflected by a woman's admiration, that without her affirmation, they disappear. And when she looks away, or worse, redirects her gaze to someone else, you don't just feel rejected, you feel erased. You start to question everything. Who am I without her attention? What part of me was real, and what part was just a reflection designed to earn her love? You didn't fall in love with her approval. You attached your sense of self to it. And now, when it fades, you feel the ground beneath you crack, not because she left, but because the version of yourself that only lived in her eyes has nowhere else to go. You were taught to be strong, to be composed, attentive, gentle, but only in ways that please her. Somewhere along the line, strength stopped meaning integrity and started meaning performance. You believed you were growing, becoming more emotionally available, more understanding, more kind. But if you're honest, most of that was never for you. It was to earn something, her affection, her attention, her approval. You wore your sensitivity like a medal, your restraint like a virtue. You thought this is love, this is maturity. But beneath all of it, you were still negotiating, bending, shaping, softening, not because it was true to you, but because you thought it made you more lovable. And the more it worked, the more you lost touch with your real self, the parts of you that didn't fit the image, the emotions that couldn't be sanitized for her comfort. So you crafted a version of yourself she could admire. But admiration isn't connection. It's a performance that wins applause, not understanding. And eventually, the man you became was a mask held together by smiles, politeness, and fear of being unwanted. That's not strength. That's survival. And until you stop acting, until you stop performing for her gaze, you'll never know if the love you're receiving is truly meant for you or just the version of you she was trained to reward. You told yourself this was love. That the way she made you feel, seeing the way her presence lit up your sense of worth, that was proof. But what if it wasn't love at all? What if it was leverage? Not malicious, not even intentional, but leverage nonetheless. Because when her smile becomes your lifeline, when her withdrawal leaves you gasping for air, you're no longer loving. You're negotiating your existence on the terms of her attention. And she might not even know she holds that power. That's what makes it harder to see. She doesn't need to demand anything, your need does all the work. You anticipate her moods. You adapt to her preferences. You censor your truth for the sake of her continued affection. And every time you do, you hand over a piece of yourself. This is not partnership. It's emotional dependency masquerading as devotion. It's the quiet transaction behind your most romantic gestures. Not "I love you," but "please keep validating me." And when she stops, when the compliments fade, when the warmth goes cold, you don't just miss her, you unravel. Because it wasn't her love you were relying on, it was the meaning you attached to it. Real love doesn't function as leverage, but the illusion of it can enslave you without a single word. You're not the only one acting. While you've been contorting yourself to win her affection, she's been shape-shifting too into the version of womanhood she was taught would keep her safe, desired, admired. Just as you were trained to equate masculinity with being chosen, she was trained to equate femininity with influence, softness, and silent control. Not through force, but through presence. Through being the mirror you're desperate to gaze into. She didn't create the script. It was handed to her through media fairy tales, family dynamic survival. She learned early that truth could be dangerous, that directness could be punished. So she chose subtlety. She learned to guide not by argument, but by emotional precision. To get what she needed not by demanding, but by becoming what you hoped for. And over time, she too began to lose herself. It's easy to resent her for the power you feel she holds over you. But what if she's also trapped? Trapped in the charm she uses to survive. Trapped in the smile that wins love but costs truth. You're both caught in roles neither of you designed, projecting, performing, hoping to be chosen. And in that mutual illusion, neither of you are truly seen. Just echoes of expectations passed down like inheritance misread as love. There comes a moment, a quiet, sobering moment when you realize that the version of yourself built for her approval is unsustainable. You've twisted, softened, performed. You've waited for the text, adjusted your truth, chased her gaze like it was the sun. And in doing so, you forgot how to stand in your own shadow. But that moment, painful as it is also sacred, because it signals the beginning of something rare: sovereignty. Sovereignty isn't rebellion, it isn't coldness, it's clarity. It's standing tall without needing to be seen. It's speaking your truth not because it will be rewarded, but because it is yours. It's choosing to be a man whose value is measured by his principles, not by how many women find him worthy. When you let go of the need to be validated, you stop performing. You start existing. You begin to see her not as judge or redeemer, but as another human being. Beautiful, flawed, complex. Not your mirror, not your muse. Just herself. And from that place, something real can emerge. It's not the absence of feeling, it's the presence of self. And that presence is what she's never truly seen in you. Not because she couldn't, but because you were too busy hiding it behind the mask you thought she wanted. You spent years asking the wrong question: what does she see in me? Every glance, every compliment, every silent moment was interpreted through that lens, as if your value was waiting to be confirmed in her eyes. But the real question, the one that changes everything, is what do I see when I look in the mirror? Because the truth is, for too long you haven't been seeking connection, you've been seeking reflection. Her attention became your compass, her praise, your oxygen. But it wasn't love, it was projection. You didn't love her for who she was. You loved her for how she made you feel about yourself, and that's not intimacy. That's dependency in disguise. Because as long as your worth is outsourced, as long as it rises and falls, with her gaze you'll never know peace, you'll only know performance. But when you turn inward, when you reclaim authorship over your own value, something shifts. You no longer need her eyes to validate your strength. You become the one who sees. And from that grounded presence, you can finally stop chasing love and start embodying it. Because only when you stop projecting the fantasy can you meet the woman, not the mirror. And only then can something honest, unshackled, and real truly begin. You've been told that manhood is something you earn through status, success, or being chosen. That once she smiles at you a certain way, once she calls you hers, then you've arrived. But what if true manhood isn't about being chosen at all? What if it begins the moment you stop needing to be? This is the turning point. the quiet revolution inside. When you no longer flinch for her approval, when her silence no longer defines your worth, when her praise, as sweet as it may be, no longer becomes your identity's fuel. That is not detachment out of bitterness, it's clarity born from truth. Because love, real love, doesn't require you to abandon yourself. It doesn't demand you shrink to be adored. And the woman who is worth standing beside won't fall in love with your performance, she'll fall in love with your presence. The grounded, unshakable man who sees clearly, feels deeply, and lives by principle, not desperation. She may sense the shift. She may walk away, or she may draw closer, curious, drawn not to the mask, but to the man. But that's no longer your measure, because manhood doesn't wait to be seen. It begins the moment you stop asking for permission to exist and finally claim your place not in her heart, but in your own. The deepest lesson here is not about women. It's about you, about where you've been placing the foundation of your identity. For too long, you may have outsourced your worth, allowing her smile to become your mirror, her attention to become your compass. But real manhood isn't something she grants you. It's something you build quietly, deliberately, and without an audience. You don't become a man when you're chosen. You become a man when you stop needing to be. When your values no longer bend for approval. When your strength isn't measured by how loved you feel, but by how deeply you're rooted in who you are, even when no one is watching. This is the shift from emotional dependency to self-governance, from projection to presence, from craving validation to radiating clarity. And it starts with asking a harder question, not does she see me, but can I stand here in my full truth without shrinking? The woman you love is not your redeemer. Her gaze is not your source. You are not a performance. You are a man. And when you begin to live like that, not from desperation but from principle, you stop chasing connection and start creating it with eyes wide open and your identity intact.